Bridget Riley. Last week we finished up our module on line. We took a look at how line was used in realistic art, abstract art, and non-objective art. We made a realistic painting with some abstract a couple weeks ago. We did abstract painting last week for our make day. This week on our make day, we're going to do a non-objective work of art in the style and vein of an artist by the name of Bridget Riley. And so we're going to talk a little bit about our curriculum that we're going to be talking about this week and next week. This is kind of a two-parter. Um, we're going to be looking at our shape module. We're going to examine how shape can be organic and geometric. We've talked a little bit about this in the past, but organic shapes, those naturally occurring shapes, geometric shapes, those little rigid shapes. We're going to discuss how shape is used in those realistic, abstract, and non-objective works. And then we're going to explore that work of Bridget Riley. You all are going to demonstrate how you can identify those organic and geometric shapes and how you can use those to create your own work of art. So let's take a look at our module today. And again, if for any reason you can't attend class, you can always check out the modules on your own or watch the lessons, of course, and then you don't have to go through the module on your own.
In art, you'll find shapes of all colors and kinds. Each and every shape begins with a line. Repeat the shapes one by one to create a pattern that's sure to stun. Geometric shapes have clear edges and lines. How many of these special shapes can you find? They're here and here and here and here. In art, you never know where they'll appear. These pentagons and octagons are geometric shapes, you know. They create symmetry that helps pieces of artwork flow. Geometric shapes are cool, but organic shapes break all the rules. None of them are quite the same. They're flowy, wild, and can't be tamed. The curve of this dragon and the bend of his tail are organic shapes, impressive in scale. These shapes have movement. These super shapes you see all come together to create unity. Some shapes are flat, while others pop right out in 3D. A square can become the cube it always dreamed it would be. To find inspiration for their art, artists look all around. From real life, like these flowers by Georgia O'Keeffe, to the depths of their imaginations. How neat! So use shapes with your art in any way you please. Let your inspiration flow. Are you ready? Get set. Let's go.
All right, we're in my Zoom meeting. Don't get interrupted. I love that little video though about shape and how we can explore shape and see it represented in those realistic works of art, the flowers and so forth, and those abstract works of art. We saw that Salvador Dali with the melting clocks and how he used shape, and even in these abstracts. So when we look at how artists use just simple pattern and that sort of thing. So let's take a look at what geometric shapes are and how they can be used in art. So artworks of all kinds, from drawings and paintings to photographs and sculptures, include shapes. Almost everything has shapes in them. Some artworks are made using just geometric shapes. And again, geometric shapes are shapes that have clear lines and edges, circles, squares. But the other thing is, these are going to be shapes that you might find in a geometry class. Geometry is a type of math that explains how we can go know the area or the volume of a shape or a form. And so those geometric shapes are often man-made, triangles, things that we probably don't look like they would be happening in nature. Some art is made using organic shapes, and these are those flowing, unstructured shapes, like a blob of paint or a rock or a tree, a cloud. These sort of naturally occurring shapes that don't look like they maybe were created by man, for instance. Some artworks created using a mixture of both, and then we're going to be looking at ours by first starting with two-dimensional geometric shapes found in art. So first of all, we're talking about two different things. Two-dimensional means it's flat, it has height and width, but no depth. If I have a post-it note, just a single post-it note, it has height and it has width, but it really doesn't have any depth. That's very two-dimensional. If I have a stack, though, of post-it notes, I still have that height and I have that width, but now I've got, it's not a whole lot, but I've got depth. It goes back into space a little bit. We can kind of see that. That's that third dimension. And so we're going to focus, first of all, on geometric shapes, those sort of man-made shapes, and then our two-dimensional. Squares, circles, and rectangles. In these colorful drawings by Julio de Park, you can spot circles, squares, and rectangles. These are all geometric shapes. Circles are made from curved lines, squares and rectangles from those straight lines. Circles and ovals are used to create this work of art. Victor Vasarely used circles and ovals. Those are both geometric shapes. Those man-made looking shapes. They have those very defined edges. Circles and ovals look quite smaller, but ovals appear slightly different because the longer curve. An oval sort of like a circle, but it's longer. Circle and a diamond. This artwork created by Jesus Rafael Soto is made of diamonds, triangles, and circles. The diamonds or rhombus is a geometric shape. It's the largest shape found in the center of the artwork. If you look really closely, you might also spot the circle in the center of the diamond. And so if you'll see that there's kind of a pattern change that creates that circle, these are non-objective. If we look there, we don't see any work of art or any subject being identified. I'm not going to look at that and go, that looks like a tree or a shoe or a dog. Those are just uses of line, shape, and color for those non-objective works of art. Hexagons. This is a piece of artwork created by Victor Vasarely that is made of by layering hexagons of different sizes on top of each other. A hexagon is a geometric shape, has 6 lines and 6 points, 6 straight sides lines. And how many hexagons do you spot in this artwork? Lord, how mercy. There are tons of them. Even with my glasses on, I would count probably maybe 20 or more. I'll let you all do the counting on those on your own. So repetition and pattern. When we see an artist repeat an element of art over and over again, whether it's line or shape or color, it very often creates what we pattern. Two very important principles of design are repetition and pattern. Repetition is that repeated subject, and pattern is that repeated lines, textures, and shapes that create a regular repetition, which means the repetition isn't just random, it happens in the same series over and over again. When shapes repeat in a certain way, the principle of design, a design known as pattern is created. Check out how these two principles of design work together to create these works of art using shape. So repetition is being used here to create these repeated white little blocks that create the pattern of this sort of little checker form. We see the repetition not creating patterns so much over here with these shapes. We got still the repeated squares, just not really creating the pattern. The pattern is created when they're repeated regularly, the same size, the same shape over and over again. This interesting use of pattern creates a pattern that sort of diminishes, gets a little smaller, or gets a little larger. And so you can kind of see the squares are regularly spaced, but they get a little smaller, a little larger, so we get a very unique pattern. Partitioning shapes. When you create an artwork using shapes, artists have decided if they want to use the whole shape or just a part of it. If we use the whole shape, we're talking about the entire thing completely, like a whole circle. But geometric shapes can be broken down or partitioned, broken into smaller parts. Understanding how the partition or the smaller parts can be used can help you create the principal design known as variety in your artwork. So think about this. If you have a square and you break it into smaller squares, you are creating variety in shapes. A variety meaning you've got different uh, types, the different representations of the subject. So a circle that gets bigger and smaller would have variety in size. A circle that has lots of different color would have variety of color. So they're looking at how you can create circles, half squares, create diamonds out of, triangles out of squares and rectangles. And this is all by partitioning or cutting these into smaller segments.
If a circle is partitioned or divided into halves, then there should be two equal parts. Let's look at these circles. Which one is divided into halves? This circle has 3 parts. We're looking for a circle with 2 parts. This circle has 2 parts, but since this part is smaller than the other part, it is not divided into halves. This circle has 2 parts, and they are equal sizes. That means that this circle is divided into halves. So, now that we know what a half looks like, let's draw on this circle to split it into halves. Here's a trick to make sure you divide your circle into 2 equal halves. Fold your circle in half so that it makes a crease down the center. Open it back up and draw a line along the crease. Now you have 2 parts that are equal sizes. If we want to divide a circle into fourths, we need to make 4 equal-sized parts. Draw another line across the center to make fourths. Now we have 4 parts that are equal sizes.
So one of the interesting things we're going to talk about today is even folding that paper in half is using a measuring tool, a measuring device, because you're essentially measuring to make sure that both those are exactly the same by comparing one to the other. When we studied Bridget Riley, she didn't use any type of measuring devices. She did everything by hand, and it's remarkable when you see how precise she was with her stuff.
These samples might help me. Which of these 3 rectangles are divided into thirds? A rectangle divided into thirds has 3 equal-sized parts. This rectangle has 4 parts, so it is not divided into thirds. This one has 3 parts, but the parts are different sizes, so they are not the same or not equal in size. But look at this rectangle. It has 3 parts that are all equal sizes. That means this rectangle is divided into thirds. Now, let's practice dividing rectangles into thirds. One way we can divide a rectangle into thirds is to draw 2 lines across. This gives us 1, 2, 3 parts that are all the same or equal in size. Another way to divide a rectangle into thirds is to draw 2 lines up and down. This gives us 1, 2, 3 parts that are also all the same or equal in size.
So again, they're saying use a ruler. Let's point out real quick, repetition is what they're creating here. Now we have not just 1, not 2, but 3 of these lines that are the same. Repetition. Same thing here. Now we have 1, 2, 3 areas that are all the same. That's repetition. And so again, they suggest using a ruler. When we look at the work of Bridget Riley, she creates these amazing geometric works and never ever uses her ruler. And so we're going to start learning about partitioning shapes and how fun it can be. And we're going to look at this week when you create work, how you can partition shapes in your non-objective artwork that you create this week. We're going to go just a little further, and then we're going to start taking a look. We're going to stop right here at this studio time because this is what we're going to do on Thursday for you all. I have to remember what day I'm on. Before we go any further, I do want to go and take a look and introduce you all to Bridget Riley. We're going to talk more about Bridget next week, but we want to take a look at what her artwork looked like. And first of all, you should know that Bridget Riley is what we call um, a um, a non-objective artist who used um, abstraction to create optical illusions. And so when we talk about optical illusions, we're talking about the idea of um, art that creates the impression of something that's happening that's not really happening. And so some artists love to trick the eyes of the viewers through the artwork they create. One artistic style that creates an illusion of a third dimension in a two-dimensional artwork, we call this op art. Now this is just one form of op art, this creating the idea of space or depth when there's not really any. This art movement got its name because artists purposely created artworks that play tricks on the viewer's eye. We might see movement that doesn't really happen. We might see depth that isn't really there. We might see colors that don't really exist. Those are optical illusions that are created in something called op art. And Bridget was an op artist. This is one of her works of art. Now, remember, I said She makes her works of art without ever using tools, which means every one of these circles she drew by hand. She placed it by hand. She did everything with lots of markers and pens and acrylic paints. She was a process artist who developed her works from sketches through underpaintings and overpaintings. A really unique artist. We can see how these are so perfectly spaced that they begin to create this awesome pattern. And as the pattern begins to create the illusion of depth, those circles slowly become those ovals we talked about earlier. They also start to get lighter in value, which creates the impression that they're going back into space. So let's meet Bridget Riley. Bridget Riley is an English artist who is considered one of the leading painters in the op art movement. Riley was born on April 24th, 1931 in West Norwood, which is a small town close to London, England. She began her career creating illustrations before dedicating all of her time to creating fine art. In the 1960s, Riley's black and white optical artworks became extremely popular as op art began to catch the attention of artists from around the globe. More recently, and that's still 20 years ago in her recent times, she branched out using only black and white to create optical art. She now uses color in her artworks too. And so we're going to start looking next week and exploring all the different ways that Bridget used geometric art and shapes in her artwork, and we're going to explore lots of different examples of her artwork, and so you can kind of see what it's like to create an optical illusion. Next week we're going to create an optical illusion, but this week we're going to focus on non-objective art, creating a work of art using those geometric shapes. All right, guys, I'll talk to you again on Thursday.